place in the world. Welcome. Let's give our hands to our new members today. So if you are new here, I feel the need to introduce myself. I have no title at this church. I am Pastor Tyler's wife. I am Pastor Gurley's daughter. And to say that I am truly humbled to be standing before you today, I am. So turn to your neighbor, say welcome to First Church, and you may be seated. For all of you that came expecting someone else, I'm sorry, they'll be preaching next Sunday and tonight. My parents are at a church in Dallas ministering today, so keep them in your prayers. So I want to talk to you today about something that if I asked a fourth of you to stand, you were struggling with. So let me do this. This center section, will you stand? Okay, if everyone in this center section was dealing with something that was diagnosable as a problem, should we talk about it? If everyone in this room dealt with it to some degree, but maybe not on this specific diagnosable level as these people, should we talk about it? You may be seated. I want to talk to you today about fear and anxiety. Almost 1 in 4 Americans are diagnosably on the continuum of the anxiety disorders. Anxiety disorders affect 25% of children between the ages of 13 and 18. Globally, the World Health Organization says that almost 300 million people have an anxiety disorder. Recent studies have shown that, namely Facebook, but other social media outlets as well, I'm really not bashing Facebook, I'll leave that to my dad, can increase people's stress level, produce anxiety, and give you a negative feeling about yourself and your self-esteem. These researchers have also found that when people are using Facebook, their state of mind and their state of well-being has declined. How many of you know that to be true? We read things and it's like instantly our day is spun off into a tangent that you don't even know why you're mad. You're just mad. Like, you don't even know if that thing was about you, but you feel like it was. And so that post was definitely meant for you, and so it's ruined your day. Barnes & Noble's, which by the way, I like bookstores. I don't want to buy it online. I don't want the app. I don't want to download it and read it on my phone. I like books. And they said that the sale of anxiety books in the last year has increased 25%. We are living in an anxious and fearful world. So what does God say about this? Let's look at his word today and let's see what God has to say about fear and anxiety. So in the words of Elder Stevie, I'm just going to call this "Don't You Worry About a Thing." So the most common fears that we place in our lives are the fear of loss, the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, and the fear of the unknown. But fear is not from God. Fear is not from God. Fear is not the opposite of faith. Fear is faith in the wrong things. Because if we put our faith in God, then we cast out fear. But if we put our faith in fear, then we have faith in the wrong things. We have faith that the bad is going to happen, that we are going to have loss, failure, rejection, and fear of the unknown. So what you fear the most reveals what you value the most. If I've got an old beat up car, I'm not really worried about it being wrecked. But if I have a car I've invested in, you better drive 6 feet behind me and not park anywhere near me. Because you fear what you value. What you put your value in is what you are most likely to be afraid. But what does 2 Timothy 1:7 says? For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of love and a sound mind. So what does sound mind mean? If God has given us this, then we should know what it is. So doing this great amount of research, here's what I have discovered, that 2 Timothy 1:7 could easily be translated like this. God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and of love. He has given you a mind that has been delivered, rescued, revived, salvaged, protected, brought into a place of safety, security, so that it is no longer affected by illogical, unfounded, fearful, and absurd thoughts. But just because we know that God doesn't give us fear doesn't mean that we don't struggle with it. God doesn't give us a lot of things, and yet we struggle with it. So I read this verse, I've heard this verse read all my life. Well, God's not giving you a spirit of fear. And it's like, well, suddenly, okay, I'm all better. What if God didn't give it to me? I don't even have it anymore. It's gone. No. We can't deny that we struggle with things that are not God-given. God may have not given it to us, but that doesn't mean that we don't struggle with it. And this in no way negates the fact that we as humans, as flesh, as people in this room right now, struggle with fear and anxiety. So what is it? What is fear and anxiety? I'm not talking about seeing a spider like I did the other night in my house during small group and having a coronary. That is not fear and anxiety. That is a bug that should not exist. I don't know why God thought to give something 8 legs and let it run around in your house, but he did. That is not what I'm talking about. Anxiety is when fear extends way beyond logic. It goes into the areas of unreasonable, unwarranted, uncontrollable thoughts. Situations that should elicit no response whatsoever all of a sudden seem life-threatening. When it's bad, it feels like an electrical current shooting up inside of your body. And it's starting to shoot out, and you just feel it about to shoot out, but instead it does something worse. It just stays in. And so you have to deal with it. Fear and anxiety didn't catch God off guard. This is not something that is not discussed in the Bible. We just don't discuss it. 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Fear and anxiety can paralyze you. It can paralyze your life. It's the feeling of getting a 3 a.m. phone call saying somebody you love is being life-flighted to a hospital and you don't know if they're gonna live, but you get that same feeling driving in a car and you have no idea why you got it. It's the same exact emotion, except I'm just driving in a car and other than Houston roads being very anxious inducing, you have no idea why you got that feeling. You have no idea why that thought was there. You're just suddenly afraid, you're just suddenly anxious, and you have no idea why. You have no idea why. As a speaker, growing up in a pastor's home all my life, and now living married to a pastor and raising pastor's kids, one thing you don't do is get up and admit a weakness on a platform. It's just not done. We don't get vulnerable up here because we're trying to encourage you. But if you don't mind, and you won't think I'm pitiful, I want to share with you my testimony today. Is that okay? You see me up here. You see my social media presence. You see who I am in this building. And I will tell you that everything you see in my life has been a struggle. I'm not trying to be pitiful. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. Okay? Look at your neighbor and say, don't feel sorry for her. I'm not asking that of you, and I don't want that of you. I am not a pitiful female, okay? I am not. But let me tell you something. Everyone struggles. Your struggles may be different than mine. You may have walked in this building with completely opposite struggles than me. But I feel like if I can tell you what one of the things I struggle with, then maybe this is a safe place that you can deal with something you struggle with, okay? Okay. So the person you see up here right now, the fear of getting up and speaking doesn't faze me. I don't have a problem with this. I have a grandmother that was a teacher, and I have another grandmother that was a speaker and taught Bible lessons at church every Sunday. I don't mind speaking. It doesn't bother me. But when I was a 12-year-old child, to say I was fearful would be to saying that, I don't know, a bug should have 8 legs. I was so fearful. And I'm not talking about I was afraid I was gonna fall down and hurt my leg. I'm not talking about I was afraid to talk to people at school. Not my issues. But what I struggled with was a crippling, debilitating fear. It peaked at the age of 12 when my dad was speaking at a camp. And when Dad would do youth camps during the summer, the whole family would go. And we would go explore during the days, and he would preach every night. And one of these trips, it was amazing. I believe we were in Pennsylvania, and we were going to museums during the day, and Pennsylvania's close to everything, so you can just drive around. And so we were driven to a medieval museum one day, and it was amazing. I got to see these beautiful medieval gowns that were just breathtaking and stuff you see only in pictures. We saw all the armor, we saw the chainmail, we saw the swords, we saw the shields. It was just amazing. Like, my family gets into really nerdy things sometimes. We love museums. And so we were in a museum, and I got caught up looking at the shoes that they wore in the medieval times, which could be compared to the shoes that we wear now, little medieval torture devices on our feet. And my family, I, of course, being a shoe person, got really caught up in the shoe exhibit. And my family had gone and walked into another room. Well, when I realized that I was alone in the museum at 12, that didn't even scare me. I was in a museum. It was a place I loved. I was good. So I thought, well, I guess I should go find where my family is. And I walked through a room that I didn't really know what it was because I didn't recognize anything. I didn't recognize what the stuff I was looking at was. And when I realized what it was, instantly it just something kind of just jerked in me. And that was probably the first time I had ever felt that wave wash over me. And when I tell you that other than my family, probably 5 other people know what I'm about to tell you. So naturally, I should tell it to the church of 1,000 people in this room, streaming. I mean, this seems like a good place to get it all out here. So I was walking through a medieval torture chamber. And first of all, that's very unnerving. My family didn't make it to that room. They had gone off a side hallway, and I didn't know where they were, and so I was trying to find them. So I walked in this room, and I saw the most grotesque devices I had ever seen, and I was 12. Let me also pause right here and tell you that as a 12-year-old, I grew up in a home without a TV, and what I saw far surpassed anything I had ever been exposed to in my life. I mean, like, the worst I could tell you was like The Shadow on late night radio, like The Shadow knows. That was like as bad as it got, like, and that little laugh, you know? Okay, there's an age level that y'all know what I'm talking about. So we used to listen to late night radio, and that was just about the worst thing I had ever seen. And so to be walking in this room, not really understanding what I was seeing, something just kind of clicked. I walked out of the room, went and found my family in the room where they were looking at medieval kitchen gadgets. So I joined in the family, we left, whatever. Nothing, no conversations about it until I laid down that night. And as a 12-year-old, the images that were suddenly flooding my mind were things I had never in my life experienced. And I'm not talking about just like a passing little thought. I'm talking overtaking your mind with the most grotesque, brutal images you can imagine. Every time I closed my eyes, I would see it, and I started screaming, "Mom, Dad, Mom, Dad." And they ran in the room. They grabbed my hands, they started praying, they said, what's the matter? And I told them what I had seen, and they were very upset because they hadn't seen it. They didn't even know what I was talking about. And at that moment, fear entered into my life. And how many of you know that minds can play terrible games with you? Terrible, terrible games. You think the world is bad. You can get a war field in your mind that you can't win, that you can't break out of. And we're good with saying, I have a heart murmur. I have diabetes. I struggle with high blood pressure. We're good with those things. You tell somebody, hey, I've got something wrong in my brain, and the stigma instantly attached to you will never go away. It's like, you can't get people to understand that the brain is an organ and it gets sick sometimes too. There is no shame in that. It sometimes gets sick too. And so your battlefield may not be the type of battlefield that I faced, but it could be something else that holds you hostage. It could be guilt over your past. It could be the germs on the car door. It could be the fear of cancer. It could be the fear of losing a job. It could be the parent that every response you give is an answer out of a place of fear. No, you can't do that, I'm afraid. No, you can't go there, I'm afraid. No, you can't go over there, I'm afraid. And there's nothing that induces that quite like parenting does. Because now, not only with you, but you've got a child to look after too. That is not how God intended us to live. I sought the Lord and he answered me and he delivered me from all my fears. All my fears. So whatever you walked in here today struggling with, God is not the God of fear. He does not want you to live in fear. I would love to say that my battle ended that night, but it didn't. And my brother's here and he can be an eyewitness. This went on for 1.5 years. Not just every once in a while, but every night of my life for 1.5 years. I would scream, I would cry, I would try to get rid of the visions of my family being tortured or my parents being killed in a car wreck or my brother and sister being kidnapped. As a 12, 13, and 14-year-old child having to deal with those images you can't imagine. You can't imagine. You wouldn't want that for your children. And an important call out is during this time, I was a pastor's daughter. I sat on the front row every single service. I sang in the choir. I directed the choir. I worshiped down front every single service. Every single service. I was in church. I loved God. I believed in God. I believed in his life-changing power, so why couldn't I conquer this? Oh, yes. Isaiah 43:1 says, "Don't fear, I have redeemed you. I've called you by my name, and you are mine." Why couldn't I accept that? I could believe it for anyone else, but I just couldn't accept it for me. It got so bad that my behavior became irrational as well. My mom would make me lunch in the mornings on the way to school, hand me the bags, And when I got to school after I ate lunch, I would take the bag that she handed me, I would fold it up in a little square, and I would put it in my backpack because I knew that that was going to be the last thing my mom gave me, because I knew when she got home, when I got home, she wasn't going to be there. I knew something was going to happen to her, and I had to keep the last thing that she gave me, and it was a lunch bag, and I was going to keep it because at her funeral, I would be able to say, this is the last thing she gave me. Irrational? Yeah. Unlikely? Absolutely. Did that matter? No. No. You can tell people that are afraid to fly the percentages of car wrecks to plane crashes. Like, you're way more likely for something to happen to you on the Houston freeways than you are on an airplane. Like, way more likely. Does that matter to people that are scared to fly? No. No. Is it irrational? Yeah. We know the facts. We know the facts. And yet there's just something in us that just gets us, and it clenches us, and we can't get over it. Guilt from our past washes over us. Do we know that we are saved? Yes. Is it irrational? Yes. Does that matter? No. Fear cripples you. And if you hear one thing I say this morning, hear this. What easier way for the enemy to defeat you than to put a thought in your mind and let you defeat yourself? You'll defeat yourself. He doesn't even have to do anything. You're going to do it on your own. All he has to do is plant a thought, and you're good. You're no more issues to him, because you alone can take a fear thought and spiral out of control, and he's got you that day. Then the next day, all he has to do is let you read one social media post that messes with your mind, and he's got you that day. The next day, all he has to do is tell you that, your finger is hurting. You could have Ebola. It's unlikely, but it's probably Ebola. You Google your symptoms, it's definitely Ebola. And your day is ruined. It's gone. That might take more than a day to get over. That might be a few weeks. WebMD is a scary place. Leave it to the professionals. Don't try it at home. Don't ever Google your symptoms, ever. But it cripples you. It takes you out. It takes you out of the race. You're no longer in the race, because he doesn't have to worry one thing about you, because you're sitting there Googling your symptoms while life is passing you by. And it controls you. Every night, I would keep my siblings awake for a year and a half with the sounds of my sobbing. I'd try to cry into my pillow so I couldn't keep them awake, but it would just overtake me, and I was hysterical. I would get completely out of my mind hysterical. I couldn't stop seeing the images flashing through my mind. I couldn't stop my thoughts. And at the age of 14, it had gotten so bad that I wouldn't go to school because I couldn't leave my parents, because I knew if I was out of their sight, something would happen to them. And when I graduated high school and chose the degree field that I went into, I started studying psychology, and there was a name for what I had. We're not going to talk about names. We're not going to put labels on stuff, because I will not own that. I will not own that. But it had gone from just a nighttime cruelty to an all-day torture chamber inside my mind. One Sunday morning, Dad preached a sermon on fear. And I'm not sure if it was the first sermon he had ever preached on fear or not, but it was the first one that I had needed. And he said that if you can shift your fear and turn it into faith in God who loves you, he will cast out fear, because perfect love casts out fear. Perfect love casts out fear. We don't really even understand that. We don't understand perfect love because we're humans, we're flesh. We get mad. You do something, I don't love you anymore. I'm so done with you. Unfriend. We were besties and now nothing. Our love is fickle. We don't have the kind of love a God loves. But when we get up here and we sing a song like perfect love casteth out all fear, fear is overcome by perfect love. What we're saying is what you're struggling with in your mind and the fears that you have, the fear of contamination, the fear of germs, the fear of walking into a world and being a witness, the fear of talking to people. Do you know that my generation, millennials, where you at? I am a millennial. I just learned that. I didn't know I was. I am. I'm like the top of you, like, and our generation is so crippled by the thought of actually having a face-to-face conversation that it is killing our self-esteem. It is killing who we think we are because the fear of actually talking to somebody is overwhelming. It is overwhelming my generation. There's more stats about it than you can possibly imagine. The fear of talking to people. And it shows the health of a millennial, it shows the emotional health that if the millennials that are involved in active conversations with each other, now, I know you all know this. All the elders in the building are like, yeah, I could have told you that. But millennials, hear me. If we will have conversations with each other, our anxiety and our self-esteem and everything we are is tied to the fact that we are now a generation of texting and social media, and we won't have a conversation with people. That's on us. That's on us. If we will put our phones away and have conversations, our anxiety will reduce. And that's one thing about this church is that we are a church of small groups. And one thing that I love is that our elders will join with us on a small group. There's a knitting small group where elder ladies teach younger ladies. Elders, we need your help. You have walked these roads. We haven't. We need you. We need your voice in our lives because we are struggling. We're struggling. This church has always been a place of freedom. This altar right here, it'll break any chain. Any chain. I went to the altar the night Dad preached about it, and I can't tell you that everything got better, but that night I learned what to do next. Fear, anxiety, regret, sin, weight, whatever your issues are, and we all got issues. It is God's will for you to live in freedom. It is God's will for you to live in freedom. Don't be afraid is in the Bible over 365 times. Every day you wake up, you could read a new scripture that says, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. The Bible talks about it. It talks about it. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. In your minds. Hebrews 21:1 says, let us lay aside every weight and every sin which clings to us so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. I told you earlier that the devil can get you out of the race just by giving you a thought. But if we lay aside the sins, and we're good with that. I mean, we know what to do to lay aside sins. We're good with that. Okay, you want us to lay aside sin? That's fine. But it doesn't just say sin in that verse. It says, and every weight. Weight. What are you struggling with? May not be a sin. Is anxiety a sin? I'm not going to have that debate with you. But at the very least, it's a weight. And it's a weight that the enemy can use to completely destroy you. Completely destroy you. So what happened? That night Dad preached. I stayed at the altar all night. That night I walked into my bedroom very nervously. A place that haunted me, the place that haunted my thoughts, the place of visions of torture. And I walked in and I said, if I can shift my gaze to things eternal. Okay, here goes, God. I lay down in my bed. I closed my eyes. I started quietly singing, what a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. That was the first night in a year and a half that I didn't cry myself to sleep. So you better believe that every time I walk into this place that breaks the chains, I'm going to be worshiping up here at the front. My worship isn't for you. It's not for you. It's because one day I finally got to sleep without crying myself to sleep as a 14-year-old. 12, 13, 14, those are bad years anyway. I was going to show you a picture of me at that age. My wedding slideshow went from 8 to 16. We just cut those years out. But I find freedom every time I walk in these doors, because this is where I shift my gaze to the heavens and I say, God, I need you. I need you. This church has become a place of freedom for so many. Whatever you walked in here struggling with, it may not be fear. It may not be anxiety, but we're all struggling with something. And whatever that is, welcome to your safe place. Welcome to First Church. I'd love to tell you that every night since then I haven't faced fear and anxiety, but that's not the case. That night I just learned how to fight. Even to this day, just to give you an example, if a family or a friend were to get into an accident, anxiety washes over me and convinces me that it is my fault for not wishing them a safe journey. If I would have just told them, be careful. Britt and Risa were driving home from ladies' conference Friday night afterwards, and this compulsion of, you've got to make sure they're going to be okay. You got to make sure they're going to be okay, washed over me. And I said, Britt, Risa, when y'all get home tonight, please text me. I won't go to sleep until you text me and tell me that you made it okay. Because it still grips me. I still struggle with it. Yes, it's irrational. So I fight. I fight. I fight. When you struggle with something, you don't just accept it, First Church. We fight. We fight. I may not look like a person that struggles with fear and anxiety, because I don't tell people I struggle with fear and anxiety, because I fight. I fight it every day I wake up in the morning. I said, not today, devil. You're not getting me today. Not today. And you may say, I don't struggle with fear. That's awesome. I opened up this lesson tonight with stats of everybody that struggles that's around you. We are in the Invite series, and there are millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people that fight the same fight I fight. And if you don't fight it, find somebody around you and say, you know what? I've got a place that you can go and you can lay down every burden, you can lay down every weight, and there is a God that will raise you up and lift you up and let you live in freedom. Welcome to First Church. Musicians, if you would come. Welcome to the healing place. Welcome to the place of beginning again. Welcome to your second chance. Welcome to your clean slate. You're here. You made it. And you're surrounded with people that have all been where you're at, and we love you, and we're so happy you're here. Welcome to First Church. This is your freedom. This is your freedom. Because God wants you to live in freedom. Altar team and prayer team, if you will all stand. Altar team and prayer team, if you will come to the front, please. 2 Corinthians 1:5 says, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Or John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you, I do not give it to you as the world gives it to you. Don't let your hearts be troubled and don't be afraid. Psalm says it this way, when anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy. 1 Peter 1:13, wherefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober and hope for the grace that is brought to you into the revelation of Jesus Christ. God did not intend for you to live captive. God did not intend for you to live in fear and anxiety. I don't care if it's the norm in today's society. He did not intend for us to live this way. So do I fight it? Yeah, I still fight it some. Do I struggle? Yeah, I still struggle with it, but it's okay. I got this. I know how to fight now. If you'll stand with me. Tennille, you're gonna get hit by a drunk driver going 120 miles an hour. What a day that will be. Tennille, your daughter may not make it. She may not live. When my Jesus I shall see. Tennille, your husband may never be able to sing again when I look upon his face. Tennille, you have a liver tumor. The one who saved me by his grace. First Church, we're gonna get destroyed in Hurricane Ike when he takes me by the hand. First Church, we're gonna be fought on every hand. And he leads me to the promised land. First Church, we're gonna reach after the hurting and broken, and we're gonna be fought for it. But what a day, a glorious day. What a day that will be. When no sin and no pain and no fear capture us anymore. When we don't live by anxiety and we don't live in strife and we don't live chained, God wants you to live in freedom. Maybe you're new here, so maybe your songs would sound something like this. I can't get over my past. I'm struggling with my past. Fear is overcome by perfect love. Perfect love. I'm afraid I'm gonna fall back into my old lifestyle. The God of angel armies is always on my side. I have a drug problem. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I'm broken. I feel like giving up. This is how I fight my battles. 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 First Church, in this place, we have a tradition, if you're new here, that we all know we have issues and we all know we've needed grace and mercy. So when the altar is open, we all come to the altar. But right now, if you are struggling in your mind, if you are bound by fear and anxiety, if there is something that's got complete captivity over you right now, I want you to close your eyes, and I'm going to pray for you right now. God, you never meant for us to live bound. It is your will that we live in freedom. In Romans, you said, "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, not height, nor depth, nor anything created will be able to separate me from your perfect love, God." So that the thief may come to kill, steal, and destroy, but God, you have come that I may have life and have it more abundantly. So God, whatever we are struggling with in this room, Lord, as we open these altars, God, I ask, Lord, that you take control of our thoughts, you take control of our minds, God, and you take control of our hearts, Lord, and you do what only you can do, because God, you are freedom, you are perfect love, you cast out all fears. If you will come to the altar, there are people here ready to pray for you. If you are struggling in this place, please come. We want to pray with you. We want to help you. If you are not struggling this morning, there is someone around you that is. And so, God, we come before you this morning, Jesus, as we move forward, God, to your altar, God, where things can change, Lord, where things happen, Jesus. Lord, I ask you, God, to move in this place. If you're in the balcony and the risers, come move forward. If you're in the back, please step forward so others can get in behind you. God, we need you here today, God. We will not let this overtake us, but God, we stand before you victorious, Jesus, because God, we need you in our lives. God, we need your strength. God, we need your peace, Lord, that passes understanding, God. Right now, Lord, I ask that every single heart in this building be turned towards you, Jesus. God, we need you, Lord. We need your peace, Jesus, that passes understanding, God. We need you in this place, oh God. We need you,